I sat at the oak dining table in my father's Manhattan apartment, the skyline glittering behind us like a smug audience. Across from me, my brother, Jordan Whitman, was in full performance mode, his hands slicing the air as he recounted the details of his latest victory. The acquisition closed at $50 million, 0 cents, he said, lifting his glass with the same arrogance that used to win him applause at prep school debates. Whitman Solutions is now the fastest growing logistics software firm in the Northeast. I'm Nadia Rivera, 33 years old, and according to my family, I'm the artsy one, the hobbyist, the failure they can't quite figure out. Jordan turned to me, his grin practically rehearsed. And what about you, Nadia? He asked, tilting his head. Still playing with that, what do you call it, NetFrame? NetForge, I said calmly, taking a sip from my glass of water. I never drank during family dinners. Too many slip-ups happen when you're not sharp. Jordan snorted. Right. Still making websites for Etsy shops and bloggers, huh? That's adorable. Our stepmother chimed in, ever the mediator. Everyone has their own pace, dear. Jordan just happened to find his early. Nadia is building something too, I'm sure. They had no clue what NetForge really was. No idea that behind our nondescript co-working space in Soho, we were building next-generation infrastructure for quantum encrypted data. We'd just signed contracts with 3 federal agencies, and yes, 2 of Whitman Solutions' biggest competitors were on our client list. But Jordan was the golden child, Ivy League valedictorian, MBA from Stanford, the family's pride and investment. My father co-signed his first funding round without blinking. He never even asked what I was working on. I heard about your new encryption tool, my dad said to Jordan, beaming. Truly game-changing. Industry-leading. I swallowed a smirk. Our engineers had exposed 2 major vulnerabilities in that exact tool last week. We'd sent a discreet advisory. It was ignored. Jordan leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Anyway, tomorrow we announce our biggest merger yet, historic even. Can't say with who, obviously. He flashed a look in my direction. I doubt NetForge deals with NDAs. Web design shops usually don't. I smiled. You're right, I said. We usually don't, but this one was different. Their puzzled expressions were still etched on their faces when, the very next morning, headlines broke across every major outlet. NetForge acquires Whitman Solutions in $120, 0 cents M strategic merger. Jordan never even saw it coming. My phone buzzed gently in my lap. A message from Ava, my COO. Everything's set for tomorrow. Their board approved the terms. Want me to send final paperwork to legal? What was that, sweetie? My stepmother asked, noticing my glance down. Just a client issue, I replied with a smile. Small business web stuff. You know how it goes. Jordan snorted. Oh, I remember those days. Hustling for $50 logos and fixing broken contact forms at midnight. He sipped his Merlot, smug as ever. But I always thought bigger. I typed back without looking up. Send everything. Meetings at 9. I emailed. Let them know we'll need their final signatures in person. The truth about NetForge was tightly guarded. On the surface, we were a boutique development agency. In reality, we ran one of the most advanced cybersecurity and digital intelligence networks in the eastern U.S. Our actual headquarters took up 3 floors of a high-security building in Midtown, staffed by over 200 of the top minds in behavioral AI, encryption architecture, and corporate defense strategy. Our clients included defense contractors, Fortune 100s, and, ironically, 2 of Jordan's biggest rivals. But that wasn't the most satisfying part. Over the last year, we'd been strategically acquiring minority shares in Whitman Solutions through intermediaries, quietly, methodically, through a web of holding companies. Jordan's revolutionary tech platform had fundamental vulnerabilities, ones our team discovered, documented, and, eventually, exploited. His valuation was unstable, his leadership overconfident. The board was anxious, they needed a bailout, and NetForge had offered one. Another glass, Jordan? My stepmother offered, holding up the wine. Absolutely, he grinned. We should toast to success, right? Then, with mock generosity, Nadia, if you ever want help scaling up, I'm happy to mentor you. Our smallest department probably pulls in more revenue than NetForge in a year. I glanced at my phone. Our updated valuation had just come through. $2.3 billion. Whitman Solutions? Not even half that anymore. That's kind of you, I said, keeping my voice even. Actually, I've got some meetings tomorrow about an expansion. Jordan raised an eyebrow, all smirk and disbelief. Oh, finally getting a proper office? Maybe hiring an assistant? Our father chuckled under his breath. Be nice, son. Not everyone gets lucky in business. I thought about the stack of merger documents waiting on my actual desk, including the new executive structure, where Jordan Whitman would report directly to me. I stood up, setting my napkin neatly on the table. You're right, I said. I should probably head out. Big day tomorrow. They had no idea just how big. If you want to see what happens when the golden boy discovers his new boss is the sister he mocked, make sure to subscribe because the next chapter is one you won't want to miss. Big day tomorrow, Jordan said, raising his wine glass in a mock toast. To small victories and modest ambitions. I simply smiled and excused myself. Driving home through the quiet Manhattan streets, I couldn't help but think back to another family dinner. 5 years ago, Jordan had just launched Whitman Solutions. That night, he held court just like tonight, painting visions of his tech empire while our parents listened, enraptured. I had tried cautiously to talk about my own venture, a new framework for securing digital infrastructures designed to preempt threats before they even surfaced. Jordan hadn't even let me finish. Oh, Nadia, he'd said with a condescending pat on my hand, security is complicated stuff. Maybe focus on something a little more in your lane, like websites or app design, creative things. Know your strengths. So I did exactly that, on the surface. I launched a creative development firm called NetForge, rented a modest space, hired a few public-facing staff. Meanwhile, in the shadows, I assembled a world-class cybersecurity team and quietly built one of the most advanced intelligence tech firms in the industry. As I pulled into the garage beneath the real NetForge tower, my phone buzzed. A message from Ava, my COO. Board gave final sign-off. Also, you'll love this. Whitman's internal merger plan lists you as reporting to Jordan. I laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the concrete. They still had no clue who was actually acquiring them. The next morning I stood in my real office, 40 floors above the city. From here, I could even see the tiny office space my family knew as my company. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. James, our legal advisor, appeared at the door. They're here. Sterling's entire executive team just arrived. Jordan? Front and center, you should have seen his face when he saw our name on the conference room door. I adjusted the collar of my designer suit, far removed from the soft cardigans I wore to family dinners. I picked up my tablet, a silent reminder of everything we had built. Quietly, relentlessly, without validation. I stepped into the conference room. Jordan stood by the window, arms folded, surveying the skyline. He turned at the sound of the door and froze. Nadia, what are you doing here? His brow furrowed. This is a confidential meeting. I walked calmly to the head of the table and set my tablet down. I know, I said. I called this meeting. He laughed, the sound forced and hollow. Don't be ridiculous. I met his gaze without flinching. You'll find nothing about today is ridiculous, Jordan. And by the end of this meeting, you'll understand exactly who owns Whitman Solutions now. I'm here to meet with the CEO of Atlas Dynamics, I said evenly. Murmurs rippled through the room. Atlas Dynamics was one of NetForge's many shell entities, an acquisition arm we had used to broker the merger. On paper, it looked like an independent consulting firm. In reality, it was a fully owned subsidiary of NetForge. I nodded at James. Start the presentation. He tapped the screen behind me. The NetForge logo bloomed into view. My company, I said. The room fell into a hush. Jordan's confident smirk evaporated. His eyes darted from the logo to the org chart appearing on screen. Confusion, then disbelief, then a pale flush of realization. That's not possible, he stammered. NetForge is just, you build websites for bakeries and yoga studios. That's our public face, I said calmly, but you might have looked a little deeper. Like who's been buying up your company's shares this past year, or who submitted the vulnerability assessment you shrugged off last month. You know, the one from that tiny firm? His hand clenched around the edge of the table. A breath caught in his throat. Behind him, one of his executives dropped a folder. Papers scattered across the floor. James advanced the slide. NetForge is the parent of 7 technology companies, including Atlas Dynamics, I continued. We specialize in AI-enhanced cybersecurity and infrastructure protection. Current valuation, $2,300,000,000, 0 cents. Gasps spread across the table. Several Sterling No Whitman Solutions board members shuffled through documents, connecting the dots they should have seen months ago. Jordan stared at the screen like it might change if he blinked hard enough. And as of 9 a.m. today, I added, we own 51% of Whitman Solutions stock. I paused, just long enough for the weight to land. This meeting isn't to negotiate a merger, it's to finalize one. You can't do this, Jordan said softly, his voice tight. You tricked us. No, your board voted, willingly, especially after we demonstrated just how unstable your revolutionary platform really is. His face flushed deep crimson. You sent those warnings? We tried to help, privately. He looked down, silent. I turned to the rest of the room. Whitman Solutions will become a division of NetForge. We'll correct the security failures, salvage the viable assets, and restructure leadership. Restructure? Jordan's voice cracked. I'm the CEO. Not anymore. I slid a folder toward him. Your resignation letter is pre-drafted, and, don't worry, it includes a very generous exit package. The next hour passed in a blur of pens scratching on paper, legal terms being confirmed, and stunned silence. When the final signature was placed, and the board began quietly filing out of the room, Jordan stayed seated. Still. Numb. Finally, he looked up at me, his voice a whisper. Why didn't you ever say anything? I met his eyes, calm, certain, because I didn't need to prove anything until now. Why? Jordan asked finally, his voice raw. Why go to all this trouble? Why pretend to be small? I leaned against the edge of the conference table, crossing my arms. Do you remember that dinner 5 years ago, I said, the one where you told me to know my limitations? You, Mom, Dad, you all decided what I was capable of without ever asking what I was actually doing. So this was revenge? His tone was more defensive now, the weight of the morning starting to sink in. No, I corrected him. This is business. Whitman Solutions, despite its problems, is a strong acquisition for us. We'll stabilize it, integrate its tools, fix the flaws. I allowed a small smile. The fact that it's deeply satisfying, that's just a bonus. My phone buzzed. A message from our mother. Jordan just called in tears. What's going on? What have you done? I held up the screen so Jordan could see. They still think you're the successful one. I tilted my head. Want to go tell them together? That evening, the family dinner felt like a mirror of the one from the night before, but flipped. Same table, same city view, but now Jordan was the quiet one, pushing food around his plate, eyes downcast. I don't understand what my father kept muttering. NetForge is worth billions, but you work in that little co-working space downtown? That's for local clients, I explained simply. Web design, branding, small campaigns. The real company operates out of Hamilton Tower. I pointed toward the skyline. Top 10 floors, north side. My office overlooks the East River. My mother reached shakily for her wine. Jordan stared at his plate. But Jordan's company, she began. I cut in gently. Whitman Solutions will be well cared for. It's now part of our portfolio. Jordan has stepped down. Stepped down is a polite way to say it, he muttered. My father turned to me, still bewildered. All these years, pretending to run a boutique agency? I raised an eyebrow. Would you have believed me if I told you the truth? They didn't answer. The silence stretched out, thick with old assumptions, years of dismissiveness. Finally, Jordan exhaled. I underestimated you. We all did. Yes, I said quietly. You did. In the months that followed, Whitman Solutions was absorbed into NetForge's operations. The vulnerabilities we'd once warned about were patched. The tech was streamlined. The company, reborn. Jordan took a role at a much smaller firm, hopefully with a deeper sense of humility. As for my parents, they stopped comparing us. not because they finally understood my work, but because they no longer had the metrics to do so. And me? I kept the small design studio running, not for income but as a symbol. A reminder that sometimes success wears simple clothes, and that the loudest wins don't always need to be announced. Occasionally, I drive past that old office and hear Jordan's voice in my head. Such a tiny startup. And I smile. Because real power doesn't come from proving people wrong, it comes from letting them believe they're right, until the moment they realize they never saw you coming. These days, when people ask how I did it, I tell them the truth. Success starts with silence and ends with a boardroom. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or told to stay in your lane, then you already know a piece of my story. I didn't set out to get revenge. I set out to build something real. But when the people closest to you can't see your value, sometimes the best thing you can do is quietly keep building until the results speak for themselves. If my journey resonated with you, even a little, I'd love to hear your story. Leave me a comment below. Tell me about the time you were underestimated and how you rose above it. And if you believe in the power of silent strength and strategic patience, hit that subscribe button. Your support means more than you know. My advice? Never let someone else define your limits. They don't see your dreams the way you do. You don't need loud announcements or validation to be extraordinary. Sometimes, the quietest path leads to the most powerful destination. I built an empire behind a simple facade, and you can too. Keep building, keep believing, and when the time comes, let them be the ones stunned by the truth. I'll see you in the next chapter.